Welcome back to Variant Quran. I'm Dr. Daniel Brubaker. Over the past year or so, and especially over the past several months, I have received a lot of response to my work, to my book, to these videos, and that is actually very flattering. It clearly talks about the perceived importance and the perceived significance of what I've been doing. Now, today I am just going to spend a few minutes. There's so much material out there, and there have been so many comments and discussions, but among those, there are some questions and challenges and accusations and assertions that seem to be resurfacing regularly, and so I just want to address a few of those. I will be spending some more time in coming days, weeks, months, answering your questions from the comments in the videos that you have been leaving. But today I just want to answer a couple of them that seem to pop up quite a bit. So one thing I will say about many of the responses that I have seen so far is that they tend to be coming from people who are, the most critical responses have been coming from people who are coming from a Muslim background, who have an apologetic view or a polemical view of these things and are really trying to defend a position that they hold, clearly personally hold, and feel to be important. And I don't fault anybody for taking that sort of position or for working to defend what they believe. I think that's an honorable pursuit if it's done in an honest way. What I have observed about these things is that they frequently come also from a non-academic, non-scholarly background. And that also I don't fault anybody for, because not everybody has the opportunity to take advanced studies in every particular subject or topic. And just because you have not done advanced studies in that topic does not mean that you are forbidden or off limits from talking about those things or thinking about them or discussing them. So it's okay to discuss things among people who don't have a solid academic background. That having been said, there are clues in almost every written document that I have seen and in every video response or other discussion that there are shortcomings academically and from a scholarly perspective. Among these are for example, the incorrect use of the incorrect transcription, including of the word Quran itself. And in Arabic, there are two letters that get represented carelessly by an apostrophe when transcribing, which is not really correct. And those letters are Ain and Hamza. The correct way of writing the word Quran, which is not written with an Ain, is with the leftward facing half circle macron, and because the forward facing or rightward facing half circle macron represents the letter Ain, which does not exist in the word Quran. So that would be incorrect if the forward facing macron is used, or if a forward facing apostrophe is used. Now, the apostrophe is sort of a careless way of writing it because it's not always easy to insert the macron when you are writing or typing. But I just want to point that out, that when you do see the word Quran written that way, that it is a mark that somebody does not have a very strong background in Arabic or in Arabic transcription. That's number one. There are two generally correct accepted ways of writing Quran. If you write it with the macron, you should also write it with the other macron over the A to show the long aleph with the mada over it that occurs in the word Quran, or you can write it without them altogether, Quran. So both of those are correct ways to write Quran, and in English. So that's number one, just a clue if you want to look at something and judge the quality of it. The next thing that I'll mention is the question that seems to come up again and again lately, the assertion that there are earlier manuscripts that contain the Uthmanic rasm, so to speak, what is called the Uthmanic rasm, than the ones that I'm showing corrections in. And this typically is presented as a suggestion that Therefore, there's nothing to be concerned about here. There's nothing to see here because there's an earlier manuscript that has it the quote-unquote right way. Well, I have never presented these things with an assertion that there is no earlier manuscript with the so-called correct reading or the standard reading. Now, obviously, that is something worth considering and looking at over time to see when these corrections or variations, if there are variants, when do they occur? Do they recur in multiple manuscripts, and so forth? But this is intended to suggest that these things that I have found are mere scribal errors or mistakes. Now, it is possible that a number of these things are mere scribal mistakes, even some of the ones that may not initially look like they are scribal mistakes. I have never denied that. I have given you my judgment about these things and my assessment of them. And, that's okay. And if somebody else wants to come and challenge that, that's fine. And the emergence of further data and information could also challenge or modify our view of these things. This is how the pursuit of knowledge works. This is how academics who are honest work with their material and so forth. And so we don't hold on to things with an iron grip and refuse to let go of them. We just look at them and think about them and get into discussions with other people who have maybe looked at them from a different angle or who have more information or different information than we do. That's how it works. But I think that there's been a misunderstanding of my assertions. Now, I did not make one of the humorous things to me about the earlier review, which, by the way, Hytham Sidki wrote a review of my book, which appeared in an academic journal about a year ago now, and that response to that review is coming. I wasn't quite sure whether to respond to it at first, but I have now written a response to it, and you will be able to see that very soon. A couple of comments about that. Obviously, there's a lot of detail in it that I will deal with, but first thing to observe about that is that Hytham Sidki does not even correctly quote the title of my book in the title of his review. It did appear in an academic journal. I don't know why nobody caught that, Hytham or the people who reviewed it, but these are, and that's the first of many mistakes and problems in that review, but I'll be talking about those more later. But the thing that Hytham says and that others have said is, well, that they haven't said, but they've asserted that there is a thesis to my book or to my work. And it surprised me when I saw that assertion because I didn't recall having stated a thesis. But Hytham and others have seemed to proceed on the assumption that I have said, which I have not, that there was a long period of standardization, that the Quran was not standardized early. Now, I have never said that the Quran is not standardized early. I have held that as an open question, and as an open question, I've allowed the possibility that it was standardized early. There are indications that would seem consistent with something like an early standardizing event. My work has been focused on how widespread and accepted the text was throughout the time in the centuries following the initial delivery of the Quran. So if, let's assume, for the sake of argument, there was an early standardization, this would not mean that necessarily there was not continued disagreement or slightly variant perceptions about what was the correct text of the Quran at some later date and in certain areas. And so my own, I won't say thesis because I haven't really presented a thesis yet, but my own assertion on this subject has been much more subtle, really, that there appears to be a certain degree of variance, a certain small degree of variance in the perception of what is the correct text of the Quran at certain points in the Quran and at certain times and places of the production of these manuscripts. So that's really important to clarify. Okay, let's see. So just dealing with a couple of other things. There is another recurring theme of defining the Quran as only those things which match what is considered to be the so-called Uthmanic rasm. And so this is kind of a convenient trick, I would say. It's not, well, it's interesting because you can say, well, that manuscript fragment is not, you can't call it a Quran because it doesn't match the standard Quran. It's something different. It looks like Quran, it's Quranic, it's a similar type of Quranic type of material, but it's not really the Quran because it doesn't match the Uthmanic text type. And I get it, I understand the line of thinking, but it does not seem to be very academic or scholarly to me because it's just too easy. You can define something by as aligning to a presumed standard that is related to you in the secondary literatures, but in order to do so, you've therefore assumed that those secondary literatures are correct in what they relate. And in this case, these secondary literatures were written 150 years or so at first after the events that they describe. So one of the questions about this work is whether those secondary literatures actually tell us the full and true story of what happened earlier. So to take them as the authority from the start, and the lens through which you view these early manuscripts is not a scholarly approach to the material. So you could say it's not the Quran as we have it today, but to say that it is not Quranic material if it does not match the documented things that we have about the text itself is really kind of disingenuous. It's a more of a rhetorical trick than a real scholarly approach to the material. Another question that has naturally arisen has been whether the scribe that I have maybe judged to be a different scribe was in fact a different scribe, or whether it was the original scribe. Obviously, this is an art, not a science, the interpretation of these manuscripts, and I have visited most of these manuscripts in person and have held them in my hands and looked at them. And so when I look at what the scribe has done and judge whether it's the original scribe or not, I'm not looking only at one of these factors. I'm looking at all these factors together. I may only cite one or two of the factors, nib width or angle of the text or color of ink or whatever, but there are actually other things. When you look at somebody's handwriting and compare it to another piece of handwriting, you can tell based upon a number of factors whether it is that person's handwriting. And you may cite a couple things about it, the loop of the that hangs down below the line is, really big or shaped a certain way or whatever, but there are other things about that. There are features of it that you just know. You can look at it and you're looking at a very complex analysis. Your brain is doing a complex analysis of what's on the page. And so when I look at script and make these judgments, I'm looking at the overall picture, and usually I think I'm correct or on the right track. So I don't think that's something that needs to be really necessarily argued about, but I'm not also defensive of somebody else stating another opinion about it. All right, so I think I'm going to leave it there today. This has been kind of maybe a little bit of a brainy video for all of you, so thank you for bearing in and for watching these things and caring about them. We will talk more in coming days. Until then, take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.